The Witcher has blown up in popularity in the last year or so, and I'm sure we can all agree that the hit Netflix show of the same name based on the books, starring the almost frustratingly brilliant Henry Cavill, is to thank. However, long before Superman shrugged off the cape and learned to swear,
Fuck.
The Witcher made history with the iconic video game The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt. Developed by a company called CD Projekt Red in Poland, The Wild Hunt is considered, by most, among the best video games of all time, thanks to its immense open world, emotionally complex characters, extensively diverse side quest system, and perhaps most of all, the overflow of passion that obviously went into it. Most people that say they love this game have never even played the first two that came before it. They went in knowing nothing about this complex story and its lore, and they still fell in love. That's a testament to just how good this game was. You may be wondering why I'm talking about the game. Well, the reason is that there are a series of comics that CD Projekt Red helped to create. Outside of die-hard comic fans, not many people I've spoken to have read or even know about these books, but I've been checking them out for myself, and I just have to share my thoughts with you. What's shaking? My name's Cam, welcome back to another video. I make videos every single week doing deep dives and discussions into fantasy and horror books, so if that's your kind of thing, don't you dare leave. Andrzej Sapkowski's dark fantasy Witcher book series are a staple in most fantasy fans' personal libraries. And for good reason. With the success of the game and the TV show, I think most people have fallen in love with Geralt and the world that he lives in. And how could you not? A badass, brooding sellsword that travels the world slaying monsters for coin is an objectively brilliant premise for a fantasy series. Personally, what I love most about the Witcher stories, both on the page and on the screen, is how episodic it is. There's a greater, more high-stakes plot, sure, but for the most part, the stories themselves are actually shorter and more self-contained, like tuning in for an episode of a truly epic show. That's a format that might be familiar in like mysteries and crime-style books, but it's also a format that I don't think is used nearly enough in fantasy. But that's a big discussion for a different day. I have been reading a Witcher comic series that CD Projekt Red created in collaboration with Dark Horse Comics. And while it's not DC or Marvel, Dark Horse Comics is an insanely famous comic brand in their own right, with series like Hellboy, Umbrella Academy, Sin City. I have to say, when it comes to the Witcher comic series so far, I'm loving it. It is the absolute best way I've found so far, maybe aside from replaying the game, to scratch that Witcher itch while I wait for season 2 of the TV show to drop, which is in like 2 weeks. 2 weeks! I'm going to be talking about each of the separate stories in these Witcher comics in separate videos, so if you want to keep up to date with them, feel free to subscribe. Today I'm talking about the chilling and immensely creepy first volume, House of Glass, which is split over 5 issues. But before I do, I just want to explain a little more about the volumes themselves and where exactly they fit into the Witcher media universe, because it can be a bit confusing when it comes to knowing if the game is canon to the show, or if the show's canon to the books, or if the books are canon to the game. You get my point. If you would like to just skip ahead to my thoughts on House of Glass though, you can find chapters in the little red bar down here, or in the description below. The games are considered non-canonical to the books and the TV show, meaning that while they draw from the original books as source material, things will happen that have nothing to do with the books or the show. An easy example of this is the iconic scar on Geralt's eye. It's actually not in the books, or at least not explicitly. So if you're hoping for Henry to get a badass face scar of his own, that might not happen. It very well could, but so far they seem to be sticking mostly to the books. The comic volumes I'm talking about today take place in the game universe, not the book one, although they do draw from some of the same plot lines. That is important to know, because if you're only familiar with the books or the show, the comic and the game can can end up feeling really unfamiliar in a lot of different ways. In 2014, CD Projekt Red and Dark Horse Comics teamed up with writer Paul Tobin to create 4 volumes taking Geralt through separate episodic stories. Stories that feel a lot like one of his quests in the games or his contracts in the show. These volumes were House of Glass, Fox Children, Curse of Crows, and Killing Monsters. Later on, a 5th and final volume would also be added to the mix, called Of Flesh and Flame. Like I said, I will be covering each of these volumes in separate videos, but for now, let's start with House of Glass. And I'll also be keeping any major spoilers out of this, although I will need to reference some things that, let's call them soft spoilers. Geralt is in the middle of a long journey when he comes across a man fishing by the lake who introduces himself as Jacob the Hunter. Jacob invites Geralt to sit with him and enjoy some food, and the Witcher repays him in wine, thankful to finally be taking some rest. They end up actually spending a few days together hunting for meals and sharing stories. Surprisingly, we even see Geralt start to warm up to this man in a way he only does around friends, even sharing knowledge about how he became one of these mutants we know as witches. Later on in the book, we'll learn that Geralt's fondness for Jacob was mostly due to how the hunter reacted to seeing him. Rather than running away in fear or attacking him for being a freak, he invited him to a meal and shared his food. Well, Jacob seems to warm up to Geralt too and tells him that he has recently become a widower. His wife was taken and turned into a Broxer, a powerful breed of vampire. The hunter still sees her sometimes, watching from a distance, but in all respects, his wife is gone. When it's time for Geralt to leave, Jacob decides to tag along, effectively letting go of the woman he loves before she kills him. They travel together through the Black Forest and run into an extremely dangerous spirit called a Leshen. The Leshen can influence the wildlife and the flora, trapping the travelers in a maze of bloodthirsty creatures. Luckily, Geralt and Jacob manage to find an abandoned house and they seek refuge inside. Unfortunately, this is when their true trouble begins, because within the house are things just as dangerous as the outside, one of which is Jacob's wife, who seems completely unwilling to let her lover leave. That's all I'll really say about the story without spoilers, but in true Witcher fashion, the story ends up descending into a grim, violent mystery. Things are very rarely what they seem, and Geralt and Jacob end up having to ask themselves if the greater danger is in here or out there. I personally loved this volume. It was brilliant. It was very, very entertaining. It wasn't too short. It was about the length of an actual short story, and it felt perfectly set within the video game world. The story builds towards this mystery within the house, and the payoff to that mystery was just... I loved that we got to see Geralt forming an actual bond with someone, and not just someone that he has to keep around, but a random stranger, simply because Jacob didn't see him as a freak. Geralt and Jacob were able to bond over the love that one of them lost, and the love that one of them isn't able to have. The best part, of course, though, and the best part usually with The Witcher, is the monsters, and there are a lot of them for one short story. I won't tell you all of them because it could lead into spoilers, but very early on in the story we get to see Geralt fight a Drowner, a Grave Hag, and a Leshen, so that was pretty damn cool. Geralt's magic was also used to great effect. Perhaps the only con I can give is that maybe the magic was even used a bit too much. It's often forgotten that witches have access to this range of abilities or signs that can push enemies away, set them alight, and more. And of course I have to mention, the art in this comic is fantastic. Every frame has this perfectly gloomy color palette, and it can be hyper detailed in the serious or exciting moments, but then also simple and almost dreamlike in others. Thanks to the art, the action has momentum, and when Geralt is overwhelmed, we can feel it, simply because of the way that the drawings and the color have been done. So that's it for House of Glass, but if you would like to see me cover the next volume, Fox Children, or if you just like deep dive videos on fantasy and horror books, I would love it if you stuck around. As always, thanks for watching, especially if you watched through the whole video. You are my favorite, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Catch ya.